Hello and welcome back to the Everyday Leadership Series, where we help you excel both professionally and personally when it comes to leadership development. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Ed Evarts to the Leadership Series. Ed is a leadership coach, a team coach and facilitator, a business strategist, podcaster, and author of Drive Your Career and Raise Your Visibility and Value. He's the founder of Excellius Leadership Development, and I'm so excited to have our conversation today. Ed, welcome to the Everyday Leadership Series.
Thank you, Rochelle. I am thrilled to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we had such a great conversation even before we started pressing record. So I am just tickled pink and cannot wait to hop in here. How about just to jump us off, how about you tell us, what does leadership mean to you?
When I think about leadership, there are certain qualities that I think a leader needs to possess in order to be effective. And most leaders want to ensure that they can make a difference in the world, and yet they sometimes get caught up in themselves in respect to growing and influencing organizations. So, for me, leadership is about impacting and influencing others to be more engaged in whatever it is that they are doing. And I talk about influence and impacting because to me, that's more the psychological side. That's the way you think about working and contributing to an organization. And then engagement is the actual work that you do. And you want to ensure that if you're going to inspire people to work hard, that they're working hard at the reason that you hired them. So, a great leader doesn't do all the work themselves. A lot of leaders like to think they do, but, they really need to ensure that employees and the people they hire do that work. And the only way you can do that is by influencing and inspiring them, and then ensuring that they're engaged in the work that they're looking to do.
I think that's an excellent point I'm going to call it bifurcate leadership between leadership and influence, influence and really inspire and inspiration. And then the second portion of engagement. I almost feel like the conversation in the general leadership space really skews towards the inspiration and influence side and not so much on this engagement piece. So I'd love for you to kind of dive deeper on that, if you don't mind. How do we basically play both sides of that field? Because the inspiration part, that's the fun part, right? But actually getting people to engage on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis, not so easy.
It's not so easy. It's the funner part, but it's the harder part, right? So, most people, when they come to an organization, have two sides to their existence. One is what they do. And so you hire somebody to be an attorney or in human resources or in accounts payable, and we expect them to be experts in those areas, right? Certainly there's training that they need, and there are changes and rules and laws affecting them that they need to be aware of, but we expect what they do for them to be experts in. It's the how you do it and how you connect with others, how you inspire others, how you lead others, how people think about you when you leave the room. That's the much harder thing to do. And in the work that I do, and I assume the work that you do, we probably spend most of our time on the how side, how to influence and impact people in positive and engaging ways so that they feel really good about the work they do, but are very active in respect to what the organization is doing. So, to your point, this is a much harder, much more complex, moment by moment behavior that people need to observe and get engaged in to ensure that they can influence and impact others effectively.
I think that's a great point. As I mentioned before we started recording, I'm an engineer by background. So, and a real, like a nerdy engineer. I have a PhD in chemical engineering. So I've definitely encountered the very smart, impersonable person, which is very much on the very strong on the I'm an expert in this field, but very low on the how you get the work done. And to your point, no one really likes to engage with those people. And I think it's really unfortunate when organizations almost feel handcuffed because, this person has, they are the expert, maybe the global expert in insert very niche topic here. But they're miserable to work with. Go ahead, please.
Well, no, I would agree with you. And I would tell you that 99% of the time when I am being spoken to by a potential client in respect to doing work, what they do is always fantastic. This is the best attorney we have. This is the best chemical engineer we have. This is the best pharmaceutical engineer we have. Brilliant IT person. No one is better. Nobody likes them, right? So they have a hard time connecting with others, getting engaged with others. And I'm not a sociologist, so I've not done any study about the comparison of intellect versus emotional intelligence, but there's definitely a conflict that can occur based on somebody's intellect level. And the smarter they are, the faster they get to answers, and they get frustrated that other people can't keep up. And rather than look for ways to inspire and engage them, they just get frustrated and irritated and hard to work with, and end up doing all the work themselves because no one can do it faster than they can, right? So there's a conflict that happens for great leaders that they need to be aware of. And when I do work with clients, I oftentimes tell them that my number one goal is to help build their self-awareness so that it can self-manage more effectively. The more self-aware of yourself you are, the better you will be to work with. If you have high self-awareness, you know your strengths and you know your areas of opportunity, and you're working on those areas of opportunity to be more effective. If you have low self-awareness, those are those difficult people to work with. They aren't easy to work with, and they don't know it, right? So they just think they're doing everything the right way and everyone else is wrong. And it becomes very, very difficult to work with them. So leadership coaches should focus on helping leaders build their self-awareness on what they're good at and what they need help on, which is everyone. There's nobody that doesn't fall under that umbrella, to help them be more effective in the workplace.
That's excellent. I'm curious, when you start engaging with clients, do you begin with more like an assessment, or is there some sort of other methodology that you use to help them build this self-awareness?
Well, two things that I typically do, and all client engagements are different, so it's not like there's a template that fits everyone. One is I ask them to tell me their life story. I really want to hear about really post-college, what they've done, where they've been, how they moved from place to place. And what I'm really listening for are patterns of behavior or perspective that have followed them, because we all have patterns of operating that we have learned when we were very, very young, that we keep with us as we grow older and older. And sometimes those patterns help, and sometimes they don't help. And so talking with people and really understanding who they are, why they are the way they are, how they see the world, how they think about interacting with others is super important in order to help them. And then the second activity we might do, and I probably do this 9 times out of 10, is a 360. And a 360 assessment is where you go out and ask people who work with you how they experience you in the workplace. So you really have a baseline to know where you are in those relationships. Everybody needs a starting point, and it's very hard to start if you don't have a starting point. So 360 can provide you a fantastic insight from bosses, peers, and subordinates, how they see you, what they like about you, and there's something that everybody likes about everybody, and then what they think you should be doing a little bit differently to be more effective. And it just provides us great insights into your current world status, so we can move forward in ways that can help you.
That's excellent. To your point, you definitely have to provide a baseline before we can improve. Right. And so I think that just makes sure that everyone is speaking the same language. I think that's excellent. Kind of along those same lines, I'm curious, obviously you've done this for a variety of organizations and a variety of locations. So, based on your experience, what is one leadership trait or quality that you noticed that most people tend to overlook?
Well, there's a number of them. So, I'll pick one. Anytime that I work with a leader, it's actually one skill, but it has two sides. One is curiosity. So many leaders are not curious enough about what others are doing or why they're thinking about the way that they're doing it in order to understand it better. They hear it, they judge it, whether right or wrong. And certainly if it's wrong, they come in with the answer. And a great way to influence and engage subordinates and employees at an organization is to really be curious about what it is they're doing, why they're doing it the way that they're doing it. In order to be curious, and in respect to being curious, you need to be a great listener. So you can't be curious and then not listen and pull out your cell phone or answer your desk phone or whatever. You have to be fully focused on the conversation that you're in. So, this is an area that if most leaders were more curious about what people are thinking, why they're thinking about it, even if they disagree, right? And this is where many leaders have a hard time navigating through, because if I disagree with you out of the box, I come in for the kill and disagree with you, and we get into a debate over it, rather than me showing curiosity about you and what you're thinking about, potentially even to learn, right? I mean, how shocking would that be, that we have a difference in opinion and I ask you some questions and I start thinking you might be correct because of what you're thinking and how you're thinking about it. So curiosity, and then listening, I think, Rochelle, is a critical area that most leaders need to do more of in order to lead more effectively.
I think that's awesome, because you're right. When we think we know, we jump to the conclusions, right? And then we jump in with the answer as opposed to being like, huh, you know what? That's actually a really good idea. And maybe you'll incorporate it, maybe you won't, but at least now it's in your broader awareness, which at least is on your awareness as opposed to being totally blindsided by it.
Right.
So
Most leaders are sometimes nervous about questions because they think they're complex. But in
right.
reality, when I work with clients, I tell them that the best questions are the simplest questions. So if
Mhm.
you and I are having a discussion about something and I don't agree with your perspective, a very simple question to ask is, why do you think that? I
Right.
mean, it doesn't get any simpler than that. Where is your idea coming from? Why do you think that? Sometimes the people we're talking to are closer to the customer and might have a better sense of what the customer really needs or wants or is experiencing than somebody who's 2 or 3 or 4 levels up. So ensuring that you're curious and ask very, very simple questions is super important. This for me started many, many years ago when I read what I think is one of the first leadership books, which is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It was published in the mid 90s, so not that long ago, but certainly back in the mid 90s, there were only 2 or 3 leadership books out there. And in it, Stephen Covey lists 7 habits, and habit number 5 is one that has stayed with me for the last 20 years, which is seek first to understand, then to be understood. So you've got to first understand where somebody's coming from, why they think what they think, before you start sharing your thoughts and perspectives. Because if you share your thought before they do, it's going to feel like they got trumped, right? That you're just sharing what you think. You don't really care about where I'm coming from and what I'm thinking about. So seeking first to understand, showing curiosity, listening really well before you come in with your perspective or thought or idea is super valuable to help grow your leadership capabilities.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Because even with curiosity, I think it's easy to skip the fact that there's a duality there. Like I can get curious, but if I'm not actively listening, then my curiosity feels shallow, dare I say.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, this started culturally in junior high and high school when we went to economics class or world history class. We were always expected to know the answer. The teacher would get up and say, okay, what is this? Or who is this? And, he or she expected every hand to go up. So we've been kind of subtly trained to come into conversations expected to know the answer. And I know from my years in corporate America, any meeting I went to or any conversation I had, I always thought that the other person expected me to know the answer. And sometimes I didn't, but it was hard for me to admit I didn't know, or that's not a way I thought about it, right? These were not the conversations that we were having. They expected me to know the answer. So it takes higher self-awareness to recognize that we don't always have the answer, and that there are ways to discuss it and ways to build our knowledge and information so we can have better answers and better solutions.
Yeah. It takes a lot of confidence to say, I don't know,
It does.
particularly in a public setting.
It does. The US presidency is a great example of that. And we've experienced it recently. But, the first US president I remember to ever say, we could have done better at that. Or, I don't know that I know the answer to that. Let me find out, was Barack Obama. Before him and after him, it feels like the US president is expected to know everything. And they try to answer everything. And sometimes when they're answering, it doesn't sound like a really well-educated answer, right? So why can't they just simply say, hey, that's a great question. I don't know the answer. Let me get back to you. But we put such weight and anticipation on them. They don't feel like they can do that. They feel like they always have to know the answer. And it does take great courage.
Almost makes you a little bit more trustworthy as well to admit and to say, you know what, I don't know, but I will find out. It makes you more, it humanizes the leader, I think is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Kind of along the same vein, let's say that you were helping someone who is trying to excel in the ranks. And they're like, I really want to excel and I want to get the most bang for my improvement buck, so to speak. So, if you had to focus on one skill or one action to really excel, both personally and professionally, in personal life as well as in career, what would it be?
Well, in my book, Drive Your Career, in the first chapter, I mentioned a skill that I think all leaders need to do on a regular basis. I never did this, right? This isn't something that I observed until after I left corporate America, started working with people, and it just hit me one day. Wow, this is a question that people need to ask their boss once or twice a year, not often. It's not like something you ask them every day, but once or twice a year, you should ask your boss, you should ask peers, and you should ask subordinates the following question: what's one or two things I can do differently to be more effective? It's not 30 or 40 things, it's just one or two. It's not better or worse. People don't like judging each other. And if you say, what's something I can do better, they may feel that what they're doing right now isn't good. And that may not be what you're attempting to say. So difference is a flatter type of perspective. What can I do differently? And who wouldn't want to help somebody be more effective? I'd love to help you be more effective, right? So I would encourage any of our listeners to talk to people, talk to their boss or talk to peers or talk to subordinates, again, once or twice a year, and say, what's one or two things I could be doing differently to be more effective? If you keep massaging and working on things you could be doing differently, your career will only grow because you'll only get better at self-awareness, how you're experienced by others, things you could do differently. So you start doing them differently. Now they're no longer something that people think you could do better. And you just keep massaging and working on it as you grow your career in your organization.
Yeah. We were talking about, Drive Your Career as a book in itself. And I know you said there were about 9 behaviors that were covered. Would you mind just diving a little bit deeper into some of the other topics now that you've sort of whet our appetite?
Well, this book came from my 15 years as a leadership coach. And I had one of those shower moments where I said, there are certain stories or anecdotes that keep coming up with clients that I work with. And whether it's a company president or a first line supervisor, these stories and anecdotes come up again and again and again. I don't bring them up purposefully. I don't say, hey, I'm going to bring this story up today, but just based on their situation or their experience, it fits. So I said, gee, I wonder what they are. And I started to pay a little bit more attention, and 9 really popped to the top of the list in respect to behaviors or actions people should think about in order to be more effective and drive their career, which is taking a leadership role in where your career is going, as opposed to just being a passenger. So the first chapter I mentioned that has that question, what's one or two things I could do differently to be more effective, is called Have a Positive Relationship with Your Boss. And this is a very important characteristic that all leaders need to have, which is ensuring that you have a positive relationship with your boss. You're not best friends. It's not like you go out for margaritas every Friday night, but if your boss has stopped by their boss in the elevator and said, hey, how's Rochelle doing? They're going to say something positive and constructive about you. So you want to ensure that you're managing that relationship. Another chapter is called Play the Hand You've Been Dealt, which is regardless of the hand that you have at work. Some people have really good hands and some people have really bad work environments, but whatever it is, play it, which is, all right, this is the hand I have. Now, what am I going to do about it? Some people are so stuck in the past, thinking about and talking about the past, they don't ever make any progress, right? So anytime I talk with a client who tells me about their current situation, I'm always very respectful and I always listen and demonstrate curiosity. But at some point I say, thank you for sharing that story with me. What are you going to do about it? And they look at me like, what? Because I hadn't thought about, oh my God, I have to do something. So, playing the hand that you've been dealt is so super important. The last one is the last chapter, which is it's all about empathy. And, there are certain leadership characteristics that after 14 years as a leadership coach and almost 20 years as a corporate employee that I've come to based on where I am in life. And curiosity is super important. Listening is super important. A third one is demonstrating empathy. Empathy is not a soft skill. Empathy is not a feel-good type of skill. It is a strategic behavior to help create engagement in your organizations. And this is the behavior of observing that somebody is not how they normally are and checking in to ensure that they're okay, and if there's anything that you can do to help them. I mean, what better way to build a relationship with others and to have them feel more engaged, to know that my boss sees me, right? And they saw that I wasn't having a good day for whatever reason, and asked me about it and wanted to make sure that I was okay. That's so important. Again, it's not something many leaders do because they think it's a soft skill and don't want to spend time on it, right? So, but there's a chapter that talks about a model for empathy and how to demonstrate it more actively in the workplace.
Yeah, I kind of want to dive deeper on that because, a lot of these topics that we discuss, in this series and others, they can be, I'll say, written off as soft skills. They're nice to have, and if you have them, then good for you. But they're not something that drives legitimate value, dare I say. So let's say there's someone who's a skeptic. So you just said, "Oh my goodness, empathy is a strategic behavior, not a soft skill." Let's say an eyebrow went up. How would you help them correlate that to, I'll call it legitimate value, return on investment, the bottom line in the organization, something that feels, dare I say, concrete for the analytical types listening?
Sure, absolutely. And the first thing I would just tell you, Rochelle, quickly is I think we have mislabeled things as soft skills. I think they're hard skills. So just like we go to college to learn economics or chemical engineering or business or law, we don't teach people things like conflict navigation and courage and empathy. And yet when I get placed into a leadership role, these are oftentimes the behaviors that are needed in order to be more effective. So we always have to remember that regardless of what organization we work in, people are people, and everybody has a story. Everybody's life is complicated. Everybody has ups and downs. And if you just treat them like an asset that is always up, no matter what, you're missing a huge piece of their existence. So this isn't something you do all the time. I tell people you're not empathetic all of the time, but you want to ensure that from time to time, in order to build engagement, because when employees are more engaged, they are focused on things like customer service, customer relationships, the bottom line. The more engaged they are, the better your business will be. And one way to show is to build engagement is to show empathy. And so from time to time, when someone isn't having a great day or seems off or just doesn't seem to be themselves, pausing for a minute to check in on them to ensure that you can help get them back on track so they can be more productive, effective, customer service friendly, customer service oriented is incredibly important. If you're ignoring it, I guarantee you what's happening is that you're building a reputation of being cold and clinical, and people will not be engaged to help you or help the organization if they feel they're working for a place that's cold and clinical. And so this is a great way to help people feel connected and engaged in your organization to help you on whatever financial metric you're working on.
That's brilliant. And you're right. No one wants to work in an organization that feels cold and clinical.
No, and that's all you'll talk about often is, hey, tell me about your boss. Oh, she's so cold and clinical. That's the first thing they're going to say, not smartest person ever or, right? It's going to be the behavior that you experience based on how you've made them feel.
Right. And I think that's what most people have been, let's say, reacting to in the Great Resignation. People leave bosses, they don't leave organizations. So, if they feel that their direct management is cold and clinical, I think that has driven a lot of the reevaluation that we've seen over the past 2 years, for sure.
I think so. I think the pandemic created kind of like a heart-stopping moment where it's like, what am I doing? Why am I here? I need to get out, right? And for whatever reason, people have moved on to other organizations just to say, hey, where I am is not working for me. And I almost guarantee you, Rochelle, that the vast majority of those perspectives were based on how they felt, not what they were doing, right? I mean, I'm sure there are some people who what they were doing isn't what they wanted to be doing, but the majority of people is how they felt about their organization, how they felt about their leader. And skills that we've been talking about today, like listening, curiosity, empathy, are all skills that you can utilize to help people ensure that they feel good about working where they're working.
Which is exactly what we want. Oh,
it is what we want. We want people to feel good about where they are and what they're doing, that their career is growing and developing and they're getting new challenges and new changes. Most people, not everyone, but most people want to feel like they're making a difference and growing their career. And ways to do it are exactly the ways that we're talking about today.
Oh, I love it. I wanted to give you a little bit of space here because I know that you have a complimentary gift associated with Drive Your Career. So tell us a little bit about that as well.
Sure, I'll be sending a link out, and what folks can get is an executive summary of Drive Your Career. So it's like a 4 or 5 page Word document for busy executives who can't find time to read a book. And in that, they can read the 9 behaviors, very truncated, but 9 behaviors associated with driving your career. And the goal, really, Rochelle, is to ensure that people on a regular basis are actively taking steps to drive their career. You're not in charge of all the decisions associated with your career. You just don't walk in one day and say, hey, I want to be a vice president today. And they say, okay, I know it doesn't work that way, but there are things you could be doing to ensure you're moving in that direction.
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of people are a lot more passive and just kind of are there for the ride and don't take steps and do things in order to ensure that they're moving forward actively. So I hope folks download it, read it, and that it can help them in their career.
Absolutely. And, just kind of sort of circle back on the second one that you mentioned, which was making sure that you are not taking a step back and actively, deciding, hey, this is the story, this is my background, but the what am I going to do about it portion, because it's really easy to lament I forget exactly how you said it, but the where you are, like make the best of the situation the hand that you're dealt.
Right.
And so it's very easy to fall into the woe is me, everything is against me, this is so terrible. But that mental transition from I don't like where I am, where am I going to go next? That mental transition is very difficult for a lot of people. If you don't mind sharing just a couple of ideas around how do you do that shift, because it's very easy to, I guess, stay in misery as opposed to action.
It is. And I would tell you, again, why it's in the book is because 9 times out of 10, when I ask a client to tell me about your work experience, they almost always talked about the past. Hardly anybody said, so here's where I want to go, here's what I want to do, here's who I want to be. It was always, past, focused on the past, et cetera. So, the first thing that you need to do is be insightful about where you are, right? I mean, a lot of people don't even think about what is the hand I've been dealt. So, I mean, they talk about it, but they haven't really looked at the hand necessarily. So the first thing you want to do is say, hey, what is the hand that I've been dealt? Have I been dealt a really good hand where I get along with everybody? My career is growing. I'm actively engaged. There are new opportunities in front of me that I can raise my hand for, right? So that might be a really good hand. A really bad hand might be, I don't get along with anybody here. I don't agree with organizational culture. I don't like what we do here. I mean, I've had people working at companies that they didn't agree with the model of the company. I mean, that's a conflict, right, for them to be able to do. So, I think all of our listeners is take a little time to reflect on what it is that, what is the hand that I've been dealt, so I have a position in order to move from. And then the second thing is really thinking about, okay, so then what is my next step? And I would suggest that for most people, what they need to do is find an accountability partner. And this is somebody whom they can work with to say, hey, here's the hand that I've been dealt. Here's what I want to do and grow. I need someone to hold me accountable to ensure that I make progress on this stuff. You got to find the right person. That's a whole nother podcast conversation, Rochelle, about finding the right mentor. But
Right.
When you find the right person, they can really hold you accountable to ensure you make progress. What happens too often is we come up with great ideas of things that we want to do. And then a year later, we're like, oh, I never did them. Or these are still the same ideas. Or didn't I talk about this a year ago? Right? Time goes by very quickly and you want to be held accountable for any action that you want to take.
No, I think that's really, really good. And so, hey, and as we're listening to this conversation, I think that Ed has done a wonderful job of curating a summary for us, because the truth is that we're all busy, right? And I know I have a bookshelf full of books that are, to say they're a third read is giving myself grace. And so I'm sure they're wonderful. I'm sure they're great. Their first
We're all
chapter is
there with
something
you.
wonderful. And I cannot be alone in that. So I think it's incredibly smart and generous to one, curate the summary and then give it to the audience for as a complimentary benefit. So, please, it'll be linked below this video. Do yourself a favor and go ahead and download that and give it a read, because certainly we all want to know what behaviors are going to help us excel so that we can drive our careers. Because to Ed's point, it's very easy to take a passive role in your career and just kind of be like, well, I'll take whatever opportunity the organization will give me, as opposed to saying, no, this is what I want. And then how can we find alignment between what my goals are and the organizational needs, which is a much more difficult conversation. It takes a lot more courage, but I think it makes it a lot, you'll be happier with your career in the end, should you choose to do that. So, and I think that goes, it all ranks throughout the organization. So thank you so much for that, Ed. I have one final question for you. You've had a long corporate career. We're 15 years in the leadership development and coaching space on top of that. So, I mean, you've been successful in two arenas, and it's hard enough to be successful in one, like, let's be honest, right? So share with us, pull back the curtain, Ed Unplugged, so to speak. What do you consider to have been your secret weapon for success up until now?
So my secret weapon for success has been a belief that there is no reason why I can't be successful. So when I transitioned from corporate to consulting, I started at ground zero. I had no clients, I had no training, I had no website. I mean, I had nothing. Yet as I networked with people and heard about how they did coaching and how they did consulting, I said to myself, there's no reason why I can't do this. And so I have possessed throughout the last 15 years a really true belief that, including ups and downs, because it's certainly not a perfect experience, including those ups and downs, that there's no reason why I can't be successful. And I believe that because that's been my platform personally, it has helped me be successful over the last 15 years. So if this is something that people want to do, for example, transitioning from corporate, you have to believe that you will be successful.
Well said. And to your point, it's not always easy. It's not always as predictable, let's say, as being in corporate. And whatever it is you choose to do, even corporate itself isn't that predictable at times. But regardless, if you can have the mindset that there's no reason why I can't do this, there's no reason why I can't be successful here, I think that will definitely take you far. Thank you so much for your time today, Ed. This has been, I think it's been wonderful, and definitely a lot of information packed in a very short timeline. Any final thoughts before we sign off today?
No, Rochelle, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to you and to your listeners about leadership. It is a wide world out there, so I encourage everyone to go for it.
Wonderful. But thank you so much, and please do have a great day ahead.
Thank you.